I wonder if anyone genuinely looked at this game and thought that it was an okay thing to birth into this world. Greetings fellow people, it is I, Jag, and don't worry, I am not reviewing the old iOS mobile port, but if I had to add another X, there would be 3 X's, and I'm sure someone would make fun of me for calling this video the Triple X review. All jokes aside, Mega Man is a series I'm familiar with in some respects. I've played at least one of most of the mainline series variations. I've played Classic, X, Battle Network, some of Legends, and a Zero game. Sorry to all the Mega Man soccer fans. I've seen countless reviews of most of these series games, but I have yet to play all the games in a given series fully. I do plan on playing a good portion of the games at some point, but as of now, I'm still technically a relative newcomer to the series. Mega Man X is a game where I'm not entirely sure if I beat it or not at some point. I remember playing it and getting far into it, though I completely forget whether or not I actually finished it. It's interesting how sometimes it's difficult for me to remember if it was me or just somebody reviewing the game that beat it. I know how the final boss and credits look and I know the story, but at the same time, it's fuzzy knowing whether or not I accomplished finishing the game. Today, however, I will also complete the game in addition to the PSP remake Maverick X, though I'll talk about that later in the video. While classic Mega Man wrapped up its life on the NES, Capcom released its first SNES Mega Man game, the new and soon-to-be beloved entry, Mega Man X. Mega Man X was, essentially, if you took Mega Man, made him and his games go through a bit of puberty. While my transition into puberty made me a degenerate teenager, Mega Man's transition was beautifully executed in the eyes of many. The design of the X series, from 1 to 4 at least, is appreciated by basically everyone from what I can tell. Even hardcore classic fans give respect to X, which is impressive to do. It's a rare occurrence for a company to make a new series on a previous IP, and for most everyone to be okay and appreciate the transition, even if they prefer older or newer series. I anticipate I will enjoy Mega Man X, but maybe I'll be the first person in history to hate it. Who knows? For the SNES portions of the review, I used the Mr. FPGA. This solution allows for near-perfect hardware accuracy, both for the system itself and the fact I can play it on a CRT TV via component while simultaneously recording via HDMI input for the video. I use this 8-bit DOE USB controller as it has very little latency when connecting to the Mister, and the form factor is close to how the SNES controller felt with its button layout. However, this video gave me a bit of a dilemma regarding how to record footage. Proper upscaling to higher resolutions can be tricky in the cases of something like an old pixel game. With most upscaling techniques in monitors and TVs, taking a low-res 240p image and upscaling to something like 1080p, 1440p, or 2160p/4K can produce varying results. Most upscaling techniques work to somewhat smooth together the image, which, while that can look good for specific content, often removes a lot of sharpness, which is crucial for getting a crisp image out of a pixel art game. The best way to get a crisp image is to do a nearest neighbor integer scale, which means that every pixel is perfectly scaled up while retaining the same image proportions. Nearest neighbor scaling looks pixelated with other content, but that's the whole point for something like a pixel game. Luckily, the Mister has many options for scaling, including integer scaling. Here are the issues. The capture card I used is limited to 1080p 60fps. 1080p is technically not the best for integer scaling, as a perfect integer scale would either be a smaller 4x scale to 960p or a more significant but cropped image of 1200p, which is an ideal 5x scale. 720p is a perfect 3x scale I can capture with my capture card. The issue is that 720p is too low of a resolution for what I want to release on YouTube, as the devices you're currently watching on are likely not 720p, and for higher end devices that display at 1440p or 4K, it would likely scale 720 in a way that would blur the image heavily. If I could capture 1440p, which is a 6x scale, that would downscale to 1080p or or upscale to 4K without a considerable loss of sharpness. I then thought that if I captured a 720p image and then did a 2x integer scale to 1440p in editing, it would produce good video quality since I can't capture 1440p natively on my capture card. I then learned that most of the standard video editing softwares don't have an easy way to get the nearest neighbor scale without paying for it. Some more specific video editing softwares did, though the only one I could technically get to work was far too inefficient for editing. So do I settle for a smaller 4x scale or the cropped 5x for 1080p? In the end, I just decided to stretch it to widescreen and apply its smoothing filter. Of course, I'm kidding, but I began to wonder how much people care about how a pixel game looks in a video on YouTube. I decided to pick a sharp but not perfectly integer scaled image that fits 1080p. But I know it's not perfect, but that's fine. Most people wouldn't be able to physically or even mentally appreciate the effort of integer scaling on YouTube, so if you have any complaints about the video, then I'm sorry. Still, I spent far too many hours trying to get the absolute perfect image, so I'm making up all the lost time by ranting about it in the video, which increases the length of the video, which is good, I think. Now, onto the actual game. The intro cinematic shows a bunch of specs and other information about X. It launches a message from Dr. Light, the creator of the original Mega Man and X. It essentially says that X was locked in a capsule for 30 plus years to make sure he wouldn't do anything morally dubious when he would eventually wake up. Good on Dr. Light for caring about how an advanced artificial intelligence would act if given a human level of consciousness and free will. Once that's over, we get some banging music and an iconic title screen. You beam into the first level and already the non-existent nostalgia is rushing in. Even though I didn't necessarily grow up playing this game a ton, the internet culture surrounding this game and this opening stage is astounding. Everyone praises this opening level for how it doesn't have any long, overblown tutorials or dumbed down level design. While there isn't anything inherently wrong with in-depth tutorials or elementary levels to start a game, I can't disagree that this opening stage is very organic in how it teaches the player. Mega Man has fundamental movements for standard platforming movesets like moving left, right, jumping, and in the case of this style of game, shooting. The unique elements of this game come down to the small details of each of those areas I just mentioned. Very early on you receive a dash move that allows X to duck down and slide forward with a burst of speed. The movement can allow for quick dodging and farther jumps. With jumping, X can slide down a wall, and if you jump while sliding, you can jump up from that wall. You can string these wall jumps to scale up one side of a structure or use it to jump away from said wall. Your primary weapon, the X Buster, can have around 3 shots on screen at any given time, which isn't all that much. However, you can hold the attack button down to charge Mega Man's Buster Cannon. These can be either a thin green shot, a more significant blue charge shot, or a pinkish wave of destruction later with some upgrades. All of these specific controls also play into each other, like how if you dash and jump away from a wall kick, you can make a considerable distance. When sliding down a wall, your cannon points away from said wall so you can fire from multiple elevations if the obstacles demand it. X may be a robot, but his controls are as organic as they come, and I think he moves beautifully. You play through the first level with very little fanfare, see some basic enemies, level designs, and whatnot. This stage does well to teach you how to play the game in a way that if you don't know what you're doing, it'll teach you naturally, and if you do know what you're doing, you can breeze through it while still having some fun. At the end of the stage, you meet this Vile guy, both in name and description. When you try to fight him, he wipes the floor with you. No matter how hard you try, nothing you do even seems to leave one scratch. While during this, he's pounding you with near undodgeable attacks. When X's health is low enough, he'll stun X and grab hold of him for a scripted sequence. I know it's common knowledge that this boss fight is one you're supposed to lose, but I'm sure when people first played this game in the 90s, people would have been horrified as this boss in the first stage would helplessly beat them. While things seem bleakest for X, you hear a charge shot of a buster cannon in the distance and another rocking tune, signifying Zero. Zero saves the day like the absolute unit he is, and Vile escapes before Zero can wipe Vile off the face of the planet. X whines about himself being weak, and Zero gives him some encouragement, saying that X has potential to get stronger. Zero's essentially the buff guy at the gym that encourages the newcomers, while Vile is the toxic guy who makes fun of those below their skill/strength level. After that, it's off to the stage select screen, where you get these lovely mug shots of the 8 main bosses. You have Chill Penguin, Spark Mandrill, Armored Armadillo, Launch Octopus, Boomer Coanger, though it should be Boomerang Coanger, Sting Chameleon, Storm Eagle, and Flame Mammoth. All of these Mavericks have stages that fit with their theming. Storm Eagle has an air base, Chill Penguin is in some snowy area, and Launch Octopus is naturally the water stage of the game. They all have enough strength and character and level design to make each stage and boss feel memorable. You have free reign at this point to choose whatever Maverick you'd like, though the fan favorite is usually to start with Chill Penguin. Chill Penguin is incredibly easy compared to the other bosses without their weapon weaknesses. You receive a special weapon when you defeat any of the 8 bosses in this game. These weapons have different attributes that differ from your standard X-Buster, like the way they fire, their damage, and other varying properties. All the bosses in this game technically have some kind of weapon weakness. In the case of Shotgun Ice, the weapon you receive after Chill Penguin demolishes Spark Mandrill. This phenomenon would later be aptly named Spark Mandrill Syndrome. If you can exploit a boss AI, endlessly stunlock them, or generally have difficulty cut to a fraction of what it should be, the boss in question likely suffers from this syndrome. Most bosses in X1, however, don't suffer from this too much, as for most of them you still have to keep on your toes and play your cards wisely if you want to make it out on top. Still, especially on your first playthrough, I'd recommend going through the boss weakness order, as the bosses are the most challenging part of this game. The game is still plenty challenging on your first go around, even if you do this, so you don't have to worry about neutering the experience. The one downside of these special weapons is that they require weapon energy. When you select a weapon, an energy meter will appear that will drain with how much you use it. This energy bar to the farthest left is your health energy, self-explanatory, while the one to the side describes your special weapon meter. The meter correlates to a specific weapon, so it's possible to drain one weapon and switch to another if need be. The way you refill both of these meters is with little capsules. The blue ones supply weapon energy, and the orange/yellow ones replenish your health. These drop after destroying an enemy, or you can find them in the levels. I almost always saved the weapon energy because I was worried I wouldn't have enough for any given boss. However, I honestly could have, since enemies are generally pretty generous with what they drop. Regardless of what I should or shouldn't have done, you can, in theory, make it through the game with just your trusty X-Buster, though I wouldn't recommend it. For specific level designs and enemy patterns, especially bosses, having special weapons will save you time, or at best, your life. My tip would be to use the special weapons you don't need for a stage's boss during the level. Since weapon energy refills itself after every stage, you can drain a weapon or two for regular platforming, making the game more fun and less likely to be frustrating at any given point. The other thing to do if you want a more enjoyable time is to upgrade X and his potential with many collectibles throughout the levels. In Chill Penguin's stage, the level design forces you into one of the collectibles, a Dr. Light capsule. So essentially, Dr. Light decided to make some armor upgrades for X in his spare time, and for some reason they're now spread randomly across the stages in this game. These capsules grant X armor upgrades, changing his sprites and gameplay. There are 4 upgrades in total. The leg parts allow you to dash and break certain blocks with your wall kicks. The game practically requires the dash, and as such, it's the upgrade out in the open. The others are a headpiece that allow you to break particular walls with your head, an arm cannon that allows charging up to the pink wave of death and charging special weapons, and the body armor that halves the damage. All except the headpiece are very useful in regular play. While the armor is very useful, I'm a little sad since I'm partial to the normal Mega Man sprite, but that's a minimal and subjective complaint. The other items you can find are hearts and sub-tanks. Hearts permanently increase your energy meter, naturally giving you more health. Sub-tanks are items that fill up with energy when you pick up health capsules when you're at max health. Think of it like saving power for later. If you find yourself low on energy, you can activate a sub-tank that's filled to give you some health in a pinch. These are all permanent upgrades, with 4 sub-tanks and 8 hearts. There is technically one other collectible, but I'll talk about that later. These upgrades usually require specific weapons, abilities, or knowledge of the level design to find and acquire them. You may have to replay a stage or two on your first playthrough to find them, but that's expected, especially if you're doing the boss weakness order. There are ways to minimize backtracking on subsequent playthroughs, like going outside of the boss's weakness order. Another thing to consider is defeating stages in a particular order can affect other locations. For example, if you defeat Chill Penguin stage, the Lava in Flame Mammoth stage will be frozen over. Another example is if you beat Storm Eagle stage, it will cause the airship to crash into Spark Mandrill stage, which causes there to be power outages throughout the stage. These alterations can help make levels easier and even allow you to get certain upgrades. For my second playthrough of this game, when I played Maverick Hunter X, I did a route to maximize efficiency in gaining all of the upgrades, though I'm getting ahead of myself. Overall, this game is flexible and fun with how you play it. You can be conservative and take things slow, or speedrun the game if you're confident in your abilities. I'll talk more about replay value when I talk about Maverick Hunter X. Know that this game was crafted in a way I think anyone could appreciate. There are very linear paths to playing this game and more open paths for those who choose, which in terms of game design, I applaud. Regardless of how you make it through the 8 stages and bosses, once you complete that, you make your way to Sigma's Fortress, the big bad of the game. There are 3 stages where you go through challenging levels and meet new and old bosses. The final stage after the 3 is just the last boss fights. First you fight Sigma's dog, Sigma with a legally questionable weapon, and then Sigma as a wolf wall thing. These bosses were where I started struggling with this game. With the upgrades I had, I couldn't seem to stay alive long enough to make it to the end of Sigma. So I decided to go back and collect all the upgrades. I then learned the hard way that if you load up a password, the best it can do is send you to Sigma Fortress 1. If you ever play this game on SNES, know you must play all 4 Sigma stages in one sitting. When I made my way back to the final boss, I killed Sigma on my second try and saved the day. X gets contemplative as the ocean swallows Sigma's fortress, the credits roll and we're greeted with a message from Sigma saying he isn't dead and he will be back. If there's one thing I know about the X series is that Sigma can't ever seem to die. On my first playthrough, I found Mega Man X delightful, though I was a little frustrated that my backtracking to get more upgrades meant I had to redo the Sigma stages. Again, the password system in this game works well. The passwords appear after you complete any level, so I was surprised the exception was for Sigma's stages, where they still gave me a password, it just didn't apply to saving what Sigma stage I was on. Besides that, I thought Mega Man X was timeless in so many ways. However, I'll still say more about the SNES game when I talk about its early 2000s PSP remake, Maverick Hunter X. Already there are huge differences between the versions, which I will get into promptly. Again, for this review I played the SNES version on the Mr. FPGA on a CRT. Overall, I would suggest playing Mega Man X on CRT if at all possible. I found certain aspects of the game to look more proper on the CRT. For example, in this scene on an LCD, I could see the separation between X from Zero and the background. From what I understand, this demonstrates the different sprite layers within the game, while the CRT makes it harder to see the sprite layer separation, which I think is best for this game. Since I was running the Mister with component cables, basically RGB, the colors looked great on a CRT as well. There are other reasons too, like how the pixels are wider on a CRT while the LCD is narrower because of things like CRT display technology combined with the unique SNES output resolution. Also, scan lines. You can totally play on a non-CRT option and be be fine. The game still looks great. I'm just exercising the CRT Master Race privilege that I own. I played Maverick Hunter X on the PS Vita for this review, though I recorded it via PPSSPP, the PSP emulator, after I finished playing through the game on the PS Vita. While the game looks very different from the SNES, I still find it charming. It is low poly 3D, though its execution I find more endearing than cheap or soulless. The game looks nice when played on the PS Vita screen, original PSP, or similar screen sizes and resolutions. It's not as iconic as the look of the SNES original, though I still think it looks pretty solid. For the video, I tried adjusting the PPSSPP settings to get a picture I felt was most appealing to what it looked like on a PSP. It's not perfect, but it is serviceable. Some upgrades I found were the character portraits for dialogue, which have these clean renditions of these classic characters. The other things I noticed was extra detail in backgrounds. Because of the PSP's processing power, many more details in the environment give far more information than what the SNES could accomplish. This also extends to enemies and telegraphing their attacks. Certain enemies now have more animations than before that help the player know what to do next. These hulking tank robots, for example, can either shoot missiles that go high or a beam attack that crawls across the ground. In Maverick Hunter X, it's much easier to see when these enemies are going to do one of the two moves, while in SNES, it's much harder to gauge before they start firing. Another simple thing of note is the music comparison. The music in Mega Man X is legendary, and I love a good number of these songs. Spark Mandrill and Storm Eagle stages are some of my favorite examples. I'll give you a short comparison between Storm Eagle on SNES and PSP. As you can no doubt tell, there are evident differences. The question as to which is better is whether or not you like or prefer the SNES sound font. I do find the SNES more iconic, but that's because the PSP game is not nearly as popular, and the SNES soundtrack was already legendary before the PSP game even came onto the scene. Things get far more interesting when it comes down to the actual gameplay between the versions. In the first level, you can already begin to notice some things, like how X's Buster Cannon takes longer to charge. Overall, I was upset at this change, as it nerfs the X Buster, which I enjoyed using very much so in the SNES game. The following significant change is that when going to Chill Penguin stage, you make it through halfway through the level, and the leg armor upgrade is nowhere to be found. Yes, some of the collectibles in this game are switched up from the SNES version, and I don't exactly know why. In the end, it's suitable as you can still make it through the game efficiently, it's just something I did not initially anticipate. There are little remixes, like some changes in enemy placements, how the Sigma stages are remixed and changed in what order you go in them, and a bunch of other little design differences. This game also has a hard mode that does the regular damage modifiers against your favor, adds more enemies, and even gives the bosses extra attacks they didn't have in the original. The other change is, of course, save memory, which is far more convenient than passwords. The Sigma stages are listed as separate stages, so you don't have to do them all in one shot. You can use the escape ability to exit a stage whenever you want, even if you didn't complete the level, and you can save and edit your controls from the pause screen. This was a big annoyance for me on SNES, because every time I booted the game up, I would have to go to the options menu on the main menu and change my controls so that the left bumper was my dash. If I forgot about that and took the time to input the password, I would have to restart from the title screen to change it and then re-input the password to get back to where I was before. Overall, there are a lot of shakeups and quality of life improvements to make this game interesting for people who have already played the SNES original. The two most significant significant additions to this game are the story elements and Vile. This game has a bunch of cutscenes, far more dialogue, and upgraded productions. Everything is voiced and given these excellent character portraits that help sell dialogue interactions. The voices are alright, not horrific, but not too notable either. They help provide extra character to the Mavericks and Maverick Hunters, and if you don't care, you can always just quickly press start and skip through the story. Once you've completed the campaign, you get access to a 24-minute anime episode called The Day of Sigma. It's intriguing and does well to flesh out and describe what happened before the game started. It technically has some continuity issues with other X games, but if taken by itself, it's a nice bonus for people wanting to know more about the game's world. In my opinion, however, the most notable addition to this game is Vile. The other unlock you get after defeating the campaign is the option to play as Vile. This is like a remix of a remix, but it's all fun to me. Vile has a different story, some alternative boss fights, slightly altered level design, enemy placements, and item locations. Vile is different from X in many ways. For one, he naturally walks faster than X, though he doesn't have access to a dash. Vile also doesn't have special weapons. He has weapons for his hands, shoulders, and oddly enough, kneecaps. After defeating bosses, you get a variety of weapon options that you can equip. You can only have one weapon of each type, and you can't exceed the energy meter of what Vile is capable of, which will grow over time. This limits it so that you have to strategize what weapons you will equip for any given stage. While playing, he also has a weapon cooldown meter that you must be aware of, preventing you from spamming one or two things. At the beginning of the campaign, Vile is a glass cannon, and generally the consensus is that his campaign is more challenging than X's. Once you get over the initial difficulty curve and start unlocking sub-tanks and hearts, Vile becomes really fun to play with all his unique weapons he can use. Another difference is that when Vile gets in a ride armor, it has a timer that runs out of time faster if you get hit. The difference is that Vile has a gun that he can use, and the ride armors are used far more frequently in gameplay and challenges to get upgrades. I just realized I completely forgot to mention ride armors for X previously. Basically, they are essentially like controlling clunkier versions of yourself that can't wall jump or shoot. They can break specific objects, take damage from enemies to a certain point, and that's about it. I honestly feel they're primarily forgettable in this game, though Vile does get more use out of them, seeing how ride armors are kind of a part of his iconic character. Mega Man Maverick Hunter X is a remake of the original SNES game. However, I feel it's almost a remix of sorts. It alters and adds enough so that you should try it out even if you've played the SNES version but not this one. The controls are different, but I got used to them and enjoyed them. While the controls aren't as good as the original, I still felt they were solid. Similarly, if you've only played Maverick Hunter X, I implore you to try the SNES original, which is still a fantastic game. The more I played Mega Man X, the more I enjoyed it. The first time on SNES was fun, but some moments felt a bit too challenging to enjoy those moments when they occurred. When I played Maverick Hunter X, I felt more confident in myself. I went outside the boss's weakness order to do an optimal route for grabbing all the collectibles without much backtracking. I enjoyed myself even more and got faster at how I played it. When I recorded footage for the PSP game, I tried hard mode, and while that of course ramped up the challenge, I still had a great time, and my knowledge from previous playthroughs helped immensely. One thing I wish I had known for my first playthrough is that if I fully charged Sting Chameleon's weapon, it could make me invulnerable for a time. If I had known that, I would have been able to wipe the floor with the final moments of the game, like how I did at the end of my playthrough of Maverick Hunter X. In all fairness, that's also because I got the Hadoken in my second playthrough. Yes, that was the final secret collectible I mentioned earlier. If you want to know how to receive it, all you need to do is look online for each version to receive it. It allows you to fire a Hadoken that destroys everything in one shot, even bosses. I didn't use it on my first playthrough as I didn't want to break the game in half. I would recommend you only get this upgrade on a subsequent playthrough, though in the end, you do you. The more I play this game, the more I will experiment with weapons, routes, and bosses. This game honestly just seems like it gets better and better each playthrough. Do yourself a favor, play the SNES game with things like the Legacy Collection, and if possible, play the PSP game in conjunction with it. I'm sorry if this review isn't all that original. That's because I genuinely think Mega Man X is a legendary game that deserves most, if not all, the hype it gets. Regardless, thank you so much for watching this review. As always, comment thoughts and opinions below about the game or me and how I do things around here. I was and am Jag, and I hope you all have a lovely morning, evening, or afternoon. Take care.